Welcome to another edition of the Heron Outlet. He is Austin Robillard. She is Alex Winley. I am Ian Hest. And the penultimate game did not go Inter Miami's way. A 3-1 loss to New York City FC. The last home game of the year officially eliminates them from playoff contention. We talked about it last week. We've talked about it for the past couple of weeks. After that second 6-game losing streak, it really looked like it was a long shot at best. They still were mathematically alive. No longer the case. They will close their season this Sunday on Decision Day against the Supporter Shield champion New England Revolution, the first time traveling up to Foxborough to face the Revs in what has been a historic season for them. Probably the opposite of how Inter Miami is feeling right now. We'll touch on that later in the show. But guys, let's start with that NYCFC game. Disappointing has to kind of be the word of the day on it. You would think that they would have had a little more of a fight. They didn't really seem to take the game to them. I've said long time that I think that NYCFC is one of the best teams and could easily win the Eastern Conference in that conference. And so that really was on display at Drive Pink Stadium. Your initial thoughts on what you saw from, just a game that I felt like encapsulated the season, that it was like, just the talent gap was too big.
Yeah, not only was the talent gap too big, but it just seemed like the drive left out of Drive Pink Stadium, not pun not intended there, from the team after the Castellanos scored that first goal. And I think Phil Neville said it best: one shot, one goal. The best players on the team are meant to make plays, and Castellanos did that in the first half. And actually, I think Miami were maybe a little hard done by in the first half because I thought that they were performing somewhat well in that first half. I thought that they were the better of the two sides for the majority of the first 45 minutes. And once the goal was scored, it just kind of seemed like they could never, turn the ship back around. And it's unfortunate because, obviously it was the Federico sending off, and also they were still technically mathematically alive. So you would have liked to see, a little more, I'll also use the word again, drive from them in the second half, but it wasn't there, and they end up losing the game 3-1. The goal that Matuidi got beaten behind by a ball, it was just, there was a lot of poor plays, individual errors, and the team just lacking not only quality but commitment, it seemed, and passion to play for the badge, I guess, if you want to call it that. It was a tough watch, and as much it was good for Figal to get a goal, I just, it was an unfortunate watch, and I wish they would have carried over the momentum they had somewhat built in the first half over to the second. But like you said, Ian, story of the season, once this team goes down, it just seems like heads drop, the confidence is low, and they have a tough time building back and getting results. There was only a couple of times where Miami at Drive Pink Stadium, it was in that stretch of like 12 or 13 games where they were winning a lot, or at least getting points a lot, where they would have some come from behind victories at home, and you just thought that maybe this could be one of those games, but the confidence just looks so low that I never really had any optimism seeing how the mannerisms were on the field for some of the Miami players. And as unfortunate as that is to say, it's just been the story of the season.
Alex, I look at this game, and to me, it just the names on the field. You look at Morales, Castellanos, James Sands, Keaton Parks. I mean, they have so much that just like that roster. It flows better. It looks like a more in touch team instead of the 11 individuals that it looked like Inter Miami had on that pitch. Is that something that you can look at a game like this as we prepare and start to talk about the offseason, that you can sort of start to look and say, like, okay, there might be a blueprint? Because we talked about it the past couple of weeks about Colorado and the season that they've had, Nashville, the season that they've had, and those being those small market clubs that have built through sort of the MLS structure. NYCFC is still a very big market, the biggest market in the country. So they're a big market team. They're playing in Yankee Stadium. They have the designated players. Is that sort of maybe a little more of a blueprint to figure out how the fluidity can look a little better?
Yes, I think Inter Miami came into this league expecting one thing and they built something completely different. And now they're on their second coach with Phil Neville, and even during the post match conference, he said verbatim, "Nothing I saw today surprised me. Nothing about today told me things that I didn't already know. The work we need to do to become winners will be a lot. I'm disappointed." So the fact that he's already saying, "Well, we knew this would happen," it shows that it was a reoccurring this was a reoccurring theme throughout Inter Miami season, the individualism, not playing as a team. And as a coach, yes, you do bear some responsibility for that, but he has dropped DPs multiple times. He's dropped Pizarro a couple of games. He's dropped Higuain a couple of games. Matuidi left halfway through one of them. So yeah, at this point, I think he also said in that post match conference, it's a matter of maybe a personnel change, and which is what we're seeing now already. There are a couple reports. Nothing has been confirmed, but Jean Mata, we did a video about him. He may be coming in, and maybe a couple of other players. But it just shows that this NYCFC game was just the two polar opposite teams, going in two opposite directions. I think over the offseason, Miami will have just a massive job to overhaul his roster. There are several players that they're on big wages, and they don't produce enough. We've talked about Julian Carranza. He's one of them. We talked about Blaise Matuidi, Rodolfo Pizarro. They don't produce enough, just outright to warrant any of these contracts. Looking at the game, they were both, Miami had their chances. They ended the game with 1.38 xG expected goals. They had several shots on target. They had several shots. So it's not like that they couldn't score, nor did they create chances. They just scuffed them. In the 16th minute, there was a perfect chance where, excuse me, Matuidi played in a through ball to Gonzalo, and he slipped through the NYCFC defense pretty perfectly, and he just scuffed the shot. He didn't get a good strike on it, and Sean Johnson was able to save it down to his left. Those are the types of moments that Phil Neville's talking about, the lack of ruthlessness in goal. And as a coach, you can only talk to your blue in the face, but you need your players to perform inevitably, and it's time and time again they've not been able to do that. You can give players instructions, but when they don't do them on the pitch, you're standing there with your arms up. So this game against New York, it was just a perfect game to encapsulate Inter Miami's season as a whole. They look good for certain periods, but there's just locker room issues and character issues where they don't go down a goal, and there's no true leaders on the pitch bar. Maybe Gregory, and it's just frustrating to watch because yes, these players are talented individuals, but they've never played as a team throughout the season, and it shows up on the pitch, and it gets very tiring to watch and to analyze because especially the end of this 2021 season, after that Nashville game where they lost 5-1, I automatically thought, I didn't think they were going to make the playoffs, and ultimately then they're not making the playoffs. So yeah, there's just going to be a massive roster overhaul, and I'm shaking my head because it's just it's unfortunate because this is Miami's football club. This is South Florida's football club, and I'd like to see it succeed. But also as a journalist, you have to be real here. This team have the talented individuals enough to compete, but they've not been able to string it together. And you see the visible frustration on Phil Neville's face at every post match conference, saying, "Oh, I knew this would happen. We're not playing as a team, we're playing as individuals. My DPs need to step up." I don't know how many more times he can say that before, stuff needs to, get blown up, basically.
I wanted to touch on you made an interesting point there, saying that this is Miami's team, and they don't really like play like Miami's team. There is a rough and tugged nature, and like an offensive but also a good defensive flair to we look at the Heat this year and everything like that. What's going on with them? One of the best. I think that the Warriors passed them as the best defensive team in the NBA, but they have been the best defensive team so far this year. You look at those Dolphins teams from yonder. You look at the Canes were known for the defense. There was like this grit that went with the flair. That this team has sort of kind of shown the opposite. They haven't really. It's been more individualistic, which is very like not Miami. Miami's sort of a us against the world mentality, And that, I guess for me, that has been the most frustrating part of how this team's iteration is. Because, I've been a broken record about this. The biggest thing is the offense. They've only scored 35 goals. It's tied for the lowest in MLS with expansion team Austin, who I didn't score for I think 11 games or so many times. Like Austin couldn't buy a goal, even if they wanted to buy the Columbus Crew. That's an inside MLS joke that
They
I
scored
will
3 last
probably
night,
get a
though.
lot of heat for. What?
They scored 3 last night. Austin did
They
against
scored
Sporting
well,
KC.
that made them tied with Inter Miami for fewest
Oh,
goals scored in
awesome.
MLS this
Quick
season.
Awesome.
side note
But,
about
yeah.
Austin FC. There's a player on there. This is just me manifesting, named John Gallagher, who I'd love to see on Inter Miami because I just think he'd fit well. But that's another podcast topic. Okay.
We'll talk about it in the offseason.
He actually
I know
he
you.
got thrown into the starting lineup last night. Actually, he wasn't supposed to
Yeah.
start, but Lima was out due to something right when they released the lineups, and John Gallagher stepped in, so he started last night.
Oh
He
wow.
wasn't on the initial team sheet. Yeah. Anyway, this
Yeah.
isn't an Austin FC podcast, but they don't score a lot. Inter Miami, they haven't scored a lot. That has been the crux of the problem, and the reason that I say that is they've also given up 53 goals, and that's not anything to shy about. That's still a lot. It's up there in MLS. But when you look at other teams, DC United has given up 53 goals. They're fighting for a playoff spot on decision day. Portland's given up 53 goals. They're comfortably in the playoffs. And the reason is DC scored 53, Portland scored 54. And so I look at a lot of the Real Salt Lake has given up 54 goals, and they're still in the playoff hunt. So on decision day, they have a chance to do this. So how much of this is, do we look at that back line and say, man, we've been really tough at times on LGP, really tough at times on Figal. There was that stretch of games with Uoa right back. We haven't really at times known who the left back was going to be. Jovan Jones was out for pretty much the whole season. Kieran Gibbs didn't play as much as we thought. Breck Shea was there for a while. Sammy Kadiri was getting time there for a bit, right? Like, we've talked so much about this defense, but have we, I guess, underestimated once the switch was made from McCarthy to Marsman? It improved, but not Marsman is a better goalkeeper. I think that we can all agree. But it was, you didn't see all the shutouts again and again and again. But the scoring is really where it is. So is this a situation where you just take the entire offense and say, you guys were not the ones getting it done, and we need Lewis Morgan to get up the field and get these crosses, and we can't have him playing left wing back anymore?
Well, I'll say this. This is how I'm going to start my rebuttal. You don't have a DP on the back line. You're not spending as much money as you are on Gonzalo Higuain, Rodolfo Pizarro, Julian Carranza, Blaise Matuidi. Those are the guys that are getting your money. And I know LGP and Figal are making a substantial amount. And I know that we have both talked about, those guys. One of those two, I think we've leaned towards LGP if one of them are to go. Leaving, he does make more money, and Figal's younger and seems to have more promise right now. But at the same time, at the end of the day, I think you're right, Ian. I didn't realize how many teams have conceded over 50 goals, but there's a lot of them in MLS, and like you said, there's still some that are contending. So it's not abnormal for a team in MLS to concede the goals that Inter Miami have. It's just the attacking output where Miami is truly lacking in terms of. I'm not going to say that conceding 50 goals is a good thing. I'm not going to say that they should be conceding 50 goals and that's okay and you should just combat that with goals of your own. But it's still doable on an MLS standard. It's still doable on an MLS level and even on an MLS playoff level. You look at Portland, the things that you just pointed out, who beat us in Portland. So it's shocking to me after you point that out, and I will say that as much discredit we've given to the back line, I think it's unfair to the likes of Christian McCoon and LGP and Figal at times, despite their yellow card issues. It's unfair to even Nick Marsman. It's unfair to Breck Shea at times when he's been playing, and even on the right side, whoever is over there, whether it's Figal, Leardom, or whoever else plays over there. Or Morgan. That's who I was going for. Right wing back Morgan. I mean, they have to have an attacking output to combat not necessarily a normal MLS standard of conceding goals, but a one that is manageable. manageable is the word I will say for what they've done in the back line. It's manageable, and other MLS teams have proven that. And where your money lies right now, if you're not able to combat that with the players that you have, the big names, high profile, star studded, if you want to call it, and high salary players, that's where the issue lies for me. And I'd be okay personally, I'd be okay with this back line going into 2022 if they were to get rid of those high profile attackers who are on a lot of money to bring in younger ones, because I think that there would be more hunger for them and more relentlessness, as Phil Neville has spoken about, to try and get goals other than what we've seen. And maybe it's not just about that. Maybe, the effectiveness and the efficiency has always been an issue. I think, Alex, you pointed out in the 16th or 17th minute, Gonzalo Higuain had that shot, which Sean Johnson saved very easily, and that should not have ever happened. I think that goal, or that shot, had more of an XG number than Figal's goal did. It had almost double the number of XG on target than Figal's goal did. I mean, the that 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 shot has to go in the net. And how many times have we said that for not only Gonzalo Higuain this year, but a lot of the other players? Rodolfo Pizarro being one of those too. I think he had a chance later on in the 86th minute that had a really high expected goals number. And that's not the first time that that's happened. There have been so many chances. And if some of these chances go in, results are going to go their way. How many different one goal losses has this team had? How many times has the defense actually kept this team in games despite the blowout losses that they've had this year? It's on the offense. I think that it's on the offense as much as it is on the more than it is on the defense. And then I guess on the midfield as well, you've had that rotating partner next to Gregory week in and week out, and maybe it has to do a little bit with that, but I would say it's more on the attacking players than anything.
Alex, how much of that weighs into the decision to bring up these Fort Lauderdale players that we've been talking about? Because, we had joked in our interview with Darren Powell that, they play a lot of 3-2 games, 4-3 games. They score a lot, but they also concede a lot. So their offense is almost like the exact opposite. It's almost like the exact opposite situation with Inter Miami. How much do you think that'll factor in next season with these players that'll come up?
A big factor. I think there's several players on Fort Lauderdale that will be coming up to the first team just because they're so direct and so good in the offensive final third. Guys like Mitch Curry, Sean Hundal, George Acosta and whatnot. I think Inter Miami are missing those sort of Route One soccer type of players that are just hungry and will go to goal no matter what. And looking at Miami's offense this year, it's mainly through Gonzalo Higuain. What he has, 13 goals, 9 assists this season. If you take Gonzalo's goals out of this team, Miami's, well, they're already at the bottom of the Eastern Conference, but I believe they would have been below Cincinnati if had Gonzalo not score all those goals. So
The
it's
only player with more with a higher xG than 3.3 is Robbie Robinson at 5.1. That's how
that's
little everybody else has produced.
Yeah, and it's a huge issue. And we've heard Phil Neville talk about it. That let's say hypothetically, if Gonzalo does retire next season, who's going to carry the offense? And it's interesting to think about. But the way that the team is going, I want to touch on your earlier point about it not being a true South Florida team. This team's not really gritty at all. It's very flashy. There's not a lot of heart. A lot of the players give up too easily. We'll touch on this later in the pod. Maybe they don't come over to clap at the end of games, but there's not a lot of grit on this team, and I think that's what's missing, and I think that's what the Fort Lauderdale guys will be able to bring up. We have already seen Sammy Gadiri, Mabika, Ascona did get some playing time earlier in the season. They've had that heart. A lot of them being South Florida natives, they have that pride playing for Inter Miami. So that's something the club is desperately missing, because when results don't go Miami's way, which was the majority of the season, a lot of the players, they're not from here, so they may not really care as much as a Gadiri would or Ascona would, and or George Acosta would. So I think bringing that Miami native, Miami blood into the team will definitely do a world of good. And not only that, they're also very good offensively, and they're young and malleable. So tactically, whatever Phil Neville throws at them, they will just dive straight in. And I'm really excited to see how that works out over the off season, and we know that preseason will be coming up sooner than we think. So we'll see a lot of changes over the next few weeks, and a lot of them will definitely be welcome changes.
Preseason's only like 10 weeks away, actually, when you look
Yeah,
at it. So
it's going to be a
it's really going to come faster than we think.
short
I wanted
turnaround.
to touch I, I wanted to touch on that 3.3 that is Lewis Morgan, his third highest expected goals for the entirety of the season. The entirety of the season is third highest on the team at 3.3. Robbie is second highest on the team at 5.1. 3.3 is one goal every 11 matches. 5.1 is one goal every 7 matches. Like, think about that, that those are your two of your three highest production like attacking options. That winds up, I mean, Pizarro, I think, is fourth at 2.9. I think off the top of my head. Don't quote me on that. But just the fact that it is just solely that the goal production and the expected goal production is Gonzalo has to be cause for concern, especially considering Lewis Morgan was playing defense for 75% of the season.
That was my point. That's what I wanted to jump in with Lewis Morgan.
I stole your thunder.
You did, but producing as a right back with the third highest expected goal total on the team, where, like you said, in that middle part of the season where Phil changed the formation, Lewis Morgan, I mean, where were his shots on target coming from, if at all, during that span? So the fact that the other attacking players were not able to produce an XG, or we say XG a lot, but I want to just clarify, XG is a
I mean,
pretty.
I like it as a stat.
I love it as a stat. I think that it's really, really important because it shows the quality of chances, and not only that, but the accumulation of chances they're getting as well. It has to do with both quality and quantity. And the fact that Lewis Morgan is that high, and the fact that he scored 2 goals this season, maybe 3 if you count the own goal, that's not enough for a player that you would want to see that you saw last year. But it's enough for a player that's playing right wing back, sure. But then you look at all the other players, and he's third highest on the team. Surely that's not enough for anybody who ranks under him, who's supposed to be an attacking player. So there's just this crazy, what's the word I'm trying to use? There's this crazy. It's almost a disassociation with the players within themselves and how they are a cohesive unit on the team, and the attacking output is, like we said, it's not. I don't think it's been as much on the defense as we have accredited to. I think that going forward, when you bring in a guy like Mabika next season, hopefully he can actually he's actually shown 2 really good MLS performances. But if he can get accustomed to MLS like quickly, and you have a young back line with Makoun and Mabika to build around, then you want to get younger on the offense, bring in those Fort Lauderdale CF guys who have shown the hunger under Darren Powell, shown the grit to grind out 4-3 wins while they were conceding at the back. Those are the players you want on the team. I don't think that Carranza or Higuain or Pizarro are the guys that are going to do that for you. Maybe even not Robbie Robinson, who has the second highest XG, but has not been scoring the goals that he should.
I want to
And just, yeah, go
excuse
ahead,
me,
Alex.
sorry, Ian. I think the Robbie Robinson, he's an interesting case because at the beginning of the season, he was looking good and he was improving from last year. But ever since that Chile incident, he's not been the same. And I know Neville said, he's a big boy, he has to make his own decisions. Clearly, it's affected him, and his output has been, abysmal. He's not been able to be as effective as he once was, which is, he still has that pace and whatnot, but it's not as, it's almost as if he's a one trick pony now. Like, defenders know how to to get his number. All they do is need to, you know press him, not let him turn, and most of the times he'll lose the ball because his back's to goal, and he's not a good back to goal player. So Robbie, I don't honestly. This is a discussion for another pod, but I don't know if he's even starting next year, depending on who they bring in. There's just, Lewis Morgan will be there. They've been, Inter Miami, it's the offseason. Inter Miami have been linked to a couple of wide players already. Does he start? I don't know, but I feel a bit bad because Robbie does have that potential, and the DK thing and whatnot. But hearing those stats about him, it's a bit disheartening and upsetting because he does have that potential, but mentality does go a long way in soccer, and that since that Chile call up and it going so down, going incredibly south. He's not been the same, and yeah, I'm curious to see how the the team handles that. I know they like him a lot, but he doesn't have that offensive output that everyone expected him to have.
I, that DK thing will always annoy me. You were always going to take Robbie first. Like we
Yeah,
have
Robbie
such
was a good player
revisionist
coming out of
history on
college.
that it'll always irk me. But anyway, I do like the expected goals conversation. The reason that I do is that Austin, you pointed out, Phil said one shot, one goal. And expected goals is what your expectation is, right? It is a cumulative stat of the chances you are creating and the probability that you are going to score that goal. So a penalty shot, for example, is I think 78, right? 0.78. So 78% of the time you should make a penalty, right? Another shot point blank might be zero point 0.6. Another shot from distance might be 0.04. So it's cumulative over the chances that you're creating. So if your goals are less than your expected goals, then you're not capitalizing on the chances that you are expected to create given the chances that you have been creating. So that Phil quote of one shot, one goal, I think is very apropos in this talk about the offense that we've had. We're going to sort of continue with this a little bit of frustration or dichotomy theme. Saturday was the last home game of the season. It was Fan Appreciation Day. And man, should we appreciate these fans because they are absolutely amazing. La Familia comes out, win a lot of losses or draws, and especially at home early in the season when they could not get results at home. This team has a tremendous amount of support from the local community that is really unique in MLS. That's one thing that I love. You don't see a fan culture like the one that Inter Miami has throughout MLS writ large. There are great fan bases throughout MLS. Don't get me wrong, but it's just like a different sort of culture that they have. But there was a little bit of frustration and maybe like feelings that things were. I mean, the season hasn't gone the way that they wanted, and they were 10th last year in the East. They are 11th this year in the East, and now with going back to 7 teams making the playoffs, they would have not made the playoffs had that not happened last year. With we all remember with MLS's back tournament and everything like that, had it increased to 10 teams. So what do we feel about the fans? I mean, maybe starting to get a little antsy, wanting to see results. How the fan appreciate. I thought that the team did a very good job with the Fan Appreciation Day of showing, hey, we get it. This has been a tough year for everybody, but also just seeing that sort of, hey, it's about time that this team starts being what we all wanted it to be. All of us. I mean, from the organization on down to Joe Schmo fan that's taking his kid to the game, we all thought that this was going to go a lot differently, in year 2. So year 3 is this sort of a whoa, what are we talking about, or is there still a honeymoon phase?
I think the honeymoon phase is kind of over and done with. To be honest, I think after 2 years of, I mean, less than mediocrity. It's been bad to say the least. I think that now the pressure is on the club to give back to these amazing supporters. The pressure is definitely, and I think Phil Neville has addressed that multiple times. He knows that's what's coming for him. He needs to give back. These supporters deserve a lot more. So I would say that honeymoon phase is done, and I think that no matter what, a lot of the fans are still going to love the team. It's their local team, as we talked about earlier, and that's not going to go away. But you owe them something now after 2 years. And I know the first year was not any. Most of the people at the club now, I mean, year 1 wasn't necessarily their fault, but going into year 2, you have like around the same points per game number. Looking at the table, I know that there were a lot more games this year, but in terms of Diego Alonso stats and Phil Neville stats, I think Miami are at 38 points in 33 games played at the moment, and Diego Alonso had 24 points in 23 games played. Someone could fact check me on that, but those PPGs are very close to one another and showing that they have similar records and they're doing pretty much the same thing. And I know, I mean, even when you look at like the consistency issues, losing 5 games in a row to start the season in 2020, we've had 2 6-game losing streaks in 2021. I mean, a lot of it is similar. And how much more can you put the fans through at this point? It's coming to the point where I understand the pressure, I understand the frustration that a lot of the fans are feeling. Not that I think they're ever going to go away, but it's become an unfortunate thing for the fans because, like you said, Ian, we all, a lot of people expected this, fans or not, expected this to go a totally different way, and it's failed on a lot of different fronts, unfortunately. And now the entire ideology of the club has even shifted because of how poorly it went. They're now shifting into not the Ronaldos and Messis and I guess Higuain's, Matui's, and Pizarro's are shifting to the guys that we talk about on a weekly basis here on the Heron Outlet. Mitch Curry,
George
George
Acosta.
Acosta, like the
Correct,
Fort
right.
Lauderdale guys, funneling people through the academy and through the USL affiliate. That's where the club has shifted. And personally, as a journalist and analyst, I like to see that a lot more. I think that it instills roots into a club that might develop a Miami culture that we've seen with other teams. Maybe they obtain that grittiness in the future because you're bringing up young guys through a system that is building them as not only players on the field but characters as well. So there's a lot of different aspects to it. But going into year 3, you have to make a playoff push. You need to get there. I think if they got to the playoffs this year, this was a conversation I had a lot last year. If they get to the playoffs, is all forgiven? Because for me, yes. If they get to the playoffs, there is this is the and that I wouldn't say it's the problem with American sports, but it's if you get to the playoffs, there's still a chance that you can go on and compete for a title. And everything that you did in that 34-game season, and if it came down to MLS Decision Day, that's the only game that matters in the entire season now for Inter Miami. If it were to come down to this Revs game, if they were to win and get into the 7th seed and sneak in, is all forgiven. For me, yes, because they get into the playoffs, they get a chance to revitalize themselves and make a cup run. They didn't do that in 2020. They lost 3-0 in Nashville, so then everything wasn't forgiven. It changes just that quickly, but that's just where, for me, Miami needs to set themselves. They have to set a bar. They have to understand they can never get this low again, and obviously the threat of relegation is not there, which is a really good thing for them. But going forward, you have to be a challenging team. You have to show that you have players that want to play for the badge. You have players that want to help the supporters, other than Lewis Morgan being the only one to clap at the end of every game. Like, you need more players like that in order to try and get into a spot where
How
everybody can be
important
happy.
is it? I want to talk about the Lewis thing because that's something that I noticed early on. He is, and listen, this isn't a knock on everybody else, but and some guys. I mean, Uoa does it a lot too. He's given his jersey to kids on the sides, but not straight to the supporter section. Lewis is the one that consistently, every single game, goes to the supporters. Win or lose or draw, he's always the one that's there. Some other guys, it's some days are good days at the office. We all have bad days at the office, so it's understandable. But I really think that is it speaks more to Lewis than it speaks to anybody else. I don't know if you feel the same way about it, Alex. Just to fact check you real fast, Diego Alonso was 1.04 points per game. Phil this year was 1.15. So it is slightly better. It is a marginal improvement. But that's just it still is 11th in the East as opposed to 10th in the East for whatever that's worth. But Alex, just to that point, going up to the fan, not just the fans, because a lot of the guys go to the sidelines where you'll see a lot more of the families. So maybe you have a lot more kids that are over there, but instead going like straight to the supporter section am I making too big of a deal over this? Is this really? I guess I just like European culture tells me that that's what you do. I don't know if I'm being a Euro snob there or what it is, but I would like to see more of it. I remember I forget what the win was, but it was such a great feeling seeing the entire team, the entire staff, they all lined up at the 18-yard box and ran up together. It was a really emotional win. And I remember seeing that. I can't remember off the top of my head what the game was. I think it was the game that broke the 6-game losing streak. Um,
Yeah,
but
I think so.
and so you could see like just like that connection. It was a moment. It was probably the moment of the season, I would say. Yeah, I think it was Montreal. Yes, I think it was Montreal. So thank you, Andres. Andres always a great producer for us. So how much of importance is that, and am I just being a Euro snob?
No, it's important. I think if Inter Miami, well, first of all, they're not even playing in Miami, and I know that's a big gripe, and I know there's the Broward folks that would love them to stay there, but it media wise, it's a bit of a,
Palm Beach folks would too.
yeah, it's for us Dade folks, it's a 45-minute drive. It's a lot, but it'd be much easier if they did have Miami Freedom Park, but that's not going to happen for quite some time. But yeah, since the beginning, this club has honestly, I think they've been a bit tone deaf ever since the inception. I think, not having pink jerseys, the season ticket holders not getting, an inaugural season ticket box. Yeah, I think they're finally giving them out now, but at the beginning that was a big issue. Maybe not, listening to the supporters when they were saying, "Oh, we just want," I think I think that at the beginning ownership wanted, superstars. That's why no one who has a good soccer IQ in their right mind would have picked up Blaise Matuidi. So, he was even in 2020, he was past his prime. I don't know, it was just a bad signing, but ever since the beginning, this front office has been, I feel like they've been a bit tone deaf, even with their hiring Paul McDonough. He was a flop, and Gonzalo Higuain, while he's a good player, unless it's a league where you need younger players to build around, that wasn't the smartest move. Pizarro, it looked like a good move at the time, but he was the superstar. He was the main face of Inter Miami, and then that all changed when Gonzalo got here, and the attention shifted away from Pizarro to Higuain, and maybe he felt some type of way of that, and that coincided with his form dipping. I don't know, but talking about the supporters, I want to read not verbatim because there's some coarse language in there. I want to read what the tifos said. There's a couple of ones in English that said "Thank you, win or lose, we will be with you," but the ones in Spanish they said, "Crap players, players with no soul. Respect the colors, respect the supporters." Now, this isn't the first time that they've done this. I believe was it after that DC lost where they wore the Ocean City. I have it right there. The Ocean City colors. Um, they lost, what, 3-1. It was a really bad loss where they played that back three for the first time, and they conceded, what, two goals in, was it 10 minutes? And after the game, we heard boos, and a lot of players, a lot of the fans were just unhappy with the performance, and supporters getting on the players. It's been a reoccurring thing during the season, so I'm not surprised. And honestly, it's not a bad banner because the players, they should do more. Especially the DPS, they've not been the
Well,
best.
I think it's healthy, Alex. I think it's
Yes,
healthy,
healthy.
right? Every family has has disagreements every now and then, and
Yeah,
so your parents tell you to clean your room, and you're not happy about it, and you fight back. So if we're saying this is La Familia, I don't think that there's anything wrong with it. I think that there's another section of this that your mother loves you no matter what, right?
yeah,
So that they will, the supporters, I think I give them a lot of credit for sticking with a very difficult thing. I was thinking when you were talking there about three specific instances that I can look back at. That was LAFC, the first ever game where that crowd was to go all the way to Los Angeles. I understand it's your first ever game, but go all the way to Los Angeles, and that away section was you heard it on the TV broadcast. It was insane because LAFC, the 3252, bring it. And so the fact that the supporters group La Familia, the sections that they are, the fact that they showed out that much. The second instance I go back to is the Red Bulls game that got rained out, because if you look at the post game scenes, all the Red Bull fans, and this is no disrespect to Red Bull fans, they were gone, and Inter Miami fans were still there cheering as an away side. I will also say that the Montreal game that had a 3-hour rain delay, that had a rain delay, I think it was on a weekday too. that had a 3-hour rain delay, and no one in La Familia left. And they were underneath the stands, still screaming. How they did that for 3 hours was absolutely insane. And then I look at New York City this past Saturday, where everything has gone wrong. Not going to make the playoffs. Everybody understands that there's going to be a lot of turnover. All the frustration has built up. Some are saying you support no matter what. Some are saying no heart, no soul. People are tensions are high, and yet they're still in it. They're still singing for 90 minutes. They're still so invested in this club. I guess my question to either one of you is, how much of that is, I guess, A, indicative of just any soccer supporters group, or B, indicative of Miami culture and what we went through to get this team, because it took so many years just to get here. So let alone not get it to where you want it, but just the fact that the team exists. I mean, you can even go back all the way to the Fusion days, right? Like, just to get here is so much. But then also, a lot of the branding around the team has been looking towards the internet, the global aspect of Inter Miami. A lot of talk, there's a supporters group in Paris. They wanted to reach out to the Latin American community in South America. That David Beckham's the owner. We can't ignore that, and his David Beckham and Phil Neville, England internationals. They went out. One of the first signings, Lewis Morgan from Scotland. There is a very big international flair. The club's name, right? The club's name is Internacional, right? So they wanted to really brand this as a global team, and I wonder how much bringing the kids through the academy now, the focus shifts towards a more local, grassroots club instead of this global brand that has been at the forefront of this the whole time, and how that will impact the supporters groups and their culture as well.
I don't think it's going to impact the supporters at all, personally. I think that a lot of what we've seen this year from the supporters is always going to continue because they're just that good of supporters. I think that La Familia is one of, if not the best fan base in MLS, and they've proven that through two almost horrific seasons, I would say. And this is, I mean, it's hard to say that they're not one of the best in MLS given what they've gone through. And the
given what they've gone through and the fact that they're like still
fully
singing and
invested
trumpets and all of this, I mean, it's crazy.
Yeah, it's insane. And the times that I have been lucky enough and blessed enough to actually travel to other games, Portland, Atlanta twice, Orlando, of course. I was at the LAFC game in year one. I was at the DC United game in year one. I mean, the Nashville playoff game, by the way, was probably my favorite one that I've ever been to. And I know that sounds crazy because they lost 3-0, but that's another one of those instances where we can look at Lewis Morgan and say, this guy walked over and handed his jersey to like a child and made her day after a horrifying defeat to Nashville. And it's just those kinds of moments from players like Lewis who are going to keep the fans invested. That's why they are so important. And if Ian, like you said, now that I'm actually going to change my answer, if you keep players like that around and you keep players who are invested in, let's say, Miami, and they come from local and you buy local, you stay local, maybe that helps the players' passion, which is going to translate into supporters' passion. So now I'm kind of thinking, well, wait a minute.
305 till I die, right?
Exactly.
Like 305 till I die.
Because I don't.
It kind of 954 in this instance.
954. No, does Gonzalo Higuain care about like Miami? Let's say, like, no, I don't think that that's necessarily the case, and maybe he was grown a liking to it. But when you bring up, let's say Edison Ascona gets a ton of minutes next year, that guy is going to be one of the most passionate guys on the field for 90 minutes all the time. He lives and breathes South Florida. That's where he's from. He's grown up here, and now he's playing for his local club, his local professional club, might I add. That is something that is special. So I think that it might actually help the supporters to stay local in terms of players, instead of this global brand bringing in high profile names. As much as that would help international exposure,
I
how,
think you went all the way around in
I
this
did a whole circle. I
in
did a
your
whole
yeah,
circle.
yeah.
But as much as the international exposure would be a good thing for this club, La Familia is what's been there through thick and thin, and it's not been the international exposure that's been there forever. It's been La Familia who's been there, and that's the people you need to um, put your thoughts towards when building a roster, when building a team, when building a club, branding the club. And I think that's why we saw that. I mean, we even saw a glimpse of that in the 2021 preseason press conference with Beckham, with Moss, with Neville, with Henderson. That was the focal point of that entire conference, and I think that that's going to be something we see next season too.
But the other thing, Alex, is like, you and I, we have all been in press conferences where there are reporters from The Guardian that come in. There are, reporters from South America that come in. So this club gets covered on that global scale. How can you not just, how do you just ignore that?
I mean, I'll take one example. Look at Ajax. They've stuck to this philosophy, this 4-4-3, 4-3-3. Excuse me, haven't had my morning tea yet. They've stuck to this
Too
philosophy for
many, too many players on the pitch there, Alex.
yeah. They've stuck to this philosophy for their entire existence. And you look at the players who leave Ajax and go to other clubs. Even then, they still have that Ajax philosophy in them, and I'm kind of envious of that because that's what I want Inter Miami to be. So when they were signing these European superstars, I was a bit, yes, they can help the team, but I was skeptical because I really wanted, players from, South Florida, maybe players that, aren't as high profile as some of these other guys to come into the club and actually properly build a culture. And when you get players who have played in Europe and all these other clubs, they may not respect the history or the foundations that they're building here in MLS because it's still a relatively new league and Miami's a new team. So maybe they're just here for a paycheck and may not care about what this club will look like in 10 years, 20 years, and 30 years from now. We look at Lewis Morgan. He's the type of guys that 10 years down the line, and we're doing like bar trivia. You say, oh, who was the first Inter Miami player to hit 50 games? Oh, it was Lewis Morgan. He started every Inter Miami game so far, and he's played the most minutes this year if I'm not mistaken. So we need the club needs more guys like that. South Florida, we need more players coming through who are Miami natives, who are Miami-Dade natives, who are Broward natives to come into the first team and grow that passion. A perfect example: Phil Neville and David Beckham, the class of '92. I think that's one of the main reasons why they hired Phil Neville in the first place because they wanted to recreate that here in South Florida, that sense of local pride, that sense of bringing up kids through the academy into the first team, and ultimately I just stole a word from Phil Neville. He uses that word a lot ultimately in his press conferences. But ultimately, once they get to the first team, they want that class of '92 feeling where they can go on and potentially win trophies 4 or 5 years down the line. And with Fort Lauderdale CF, we see that Georgia Costa, Ascona, and even the guys who aren't South Florida natives like Mabika who are coming through, they're still young enough to be able to build that foundation. So in 4 years time, if Inter Miami want to challenge for MLS Cup, they can do so. And that's one of the main reasons why I think I'm probably going to get heat for this, but the sanctions are maybe a blessing in disguise because this front office, they were spending money willy nilly. Look at Julian Carranza. There, he's on an absurd amount of wages. Excuse me, and he's not, had that output. So, and Pizarro, the club spent 12 million on him, and he's had what? How many goals in his Inter Miami career? What, 9 in the span of 2 years, and it's just not good enough. And let's say you replace hypothetically you replace Pizarro with a Georgia Costa. Georgia Costa, he's from Miami. He's from South Florida. He will have that passion to go and clap the supporters afterwards because he's ashamed of the results and if they lose. So I am just really intrigued and excited by this offseason because, not only will they have local talent, they will be bringing in players like, we've heard the John Mata rumors, that are cheap but still good enough to play in a league like MLS. And, look at Gregory. He came in immediately and, cemented himself as the captain, which is, telling that a guy from Brazil can come in and cement his place as, the team's leader and, Gonzalo Higuain couldn't, Blaise Matuidi couldn't, LGP couldn't, Figal couldn't. So maybe the sanctions are what Miami need in order to get back on track. And let's say after the sanctions pass and they have money freely to spend, these 2 years they'll have a foundation to be able to build on top of that. So if they do want to go out and get a European superstar that fits the philosophy that they've built through these 3 years, they can go out and do that, and that European superstar will be able to play alongside the Sammy Guediris and the Asconas, the Felipe Valencias and the Georgia Costas to build a winning roster.
Guys, let's transition to decision day and what's in store for Inter Miami. The New England Revolution, the Supporter Shield champions, 73 points, an MLS record, never before done in MLS history, and they did it with a game to spare. So a very impressive team. Inter Miami, really, neither team has anything really to play for. New England will get a bye, so they might play some of their players just because they're not going to have that midweek game that everybody else is going to have. They'll have that whole week off. But decision day, always fun. All the Eastern Conference teams, well, Houston ended their season last night, but all the Eastern Conference teams will play at 3:30. All the Western Conference teams will play at 6. Not really anything to play for Inter Miami. They currently will hold the 7th overall pick in the MLS Super Draft. That can only change to 8th if they win and San Jose, who is playing FC Dallas, wins or draws against FC Dallas. Then Inter Miami, if they win, would have the 8th pick instead of the 7th. That being said, is this a chance to just kind of throw some names out there that haven't been playing, get a feel? We talked about this last week and it didn't really wind up happening. We got a little more of a traditional lineup, at least than what I was expecting. So what do we think in terms of what Phil is thinking for this last game of the season?
I kind of think that the reason that we got that more traditional lineup last game was for two reasons. One, Federico, you want to send him off with a win, and two, they were still technically, mathematically in a playoff race, so you can't really just act like you're giving up at that point when you're still technically in it, even though we know they needed to make up like an 18 goal differential, and that wasn't really going to happen, but you have to show something for it. So that was, I think that's where that came from. But in this match against the Revs, who have, they're playing in front of their fans, they're accepting the Supporters Shield trophy, and they're also trying to extend their record for most points in an MLS season. I think that they have something to play for, and
so that they have it for a longer time,
exactly.
right?
So if you're Phil Neville, do you say, okay, you know what, we want to be spoilers, or do you want to say, let me get some of these guys out here who haven't gotten a lot of minutes, like Ventura Alvarado, to see if I want him in 2022. I think that he has to balance those two things. But I don't think we're going to get a fully traditional lineup. I think that there will be some interesting decisions. And it should be a good game, but we know what the Revs did to us, and we know the quality that the Revs have. And I'm not like super inclined to watch it. I'm a little worried about watching it, but at the same time, I want to see if the starting lineup, is something that we haven't seen normally. That's something that's going to really be intriguing to me, because I want to know what some of these players can do against a record-setting MLS side.
Yeah, I personally think that the Revs will go full out. They don't play again. They have a first round bye, so they won't play again until late November. I think November 30th. I don't know. Bruce Arenas had mentioned something about NFL and whatnot, but they won't play until late November. So I fully expect them to go with a full strength lineup to get those guys minutes before they go into a 2 week hiatus before they play their next game, just to get some reps. Maybe by the, I don't know, 60th minute, he'll pull some of the starters and play the third, second string guys. But yeah, it's not going to be an easy game for Miami, and yeah, I'd like for Neville to play some of these Ventura Alvarados, Asconas, Gadiris, but I personally I think that um I think, yeah, he'll probably go full strength again. I don't know, Pizarro, Matuidi. I know Jay Chapman gets a lot of flack, but I like his game. He does a lot of the little things well, and I think that he'll go with a full strength lineup. I think Gonzalo will start. Fede already retired. Pizarro will start and whatnot. So yeah, it'll be a difficult game, but I fully expect them to hopefully give it a go. But I don't think it'll go their way.
That will be decision day, 3:30 p.m. All those games are for the East Coast teams, for the Eastern Conference teams, and then the West Coast teams, a 6 p.m. kickoff. Interesting to note, Orlando City is not out of the woods yet. I know that the rivalry has started to sort of heat up, but as Inter Miami does not make the playoffs, Orlando City is not. It's amazing to think because they were second in the East for so long this year. But with a loss to Montreal, Montreal will be ahead of them. If New York Red Bulls win their match as well, Orlando City's out of the playoffs. Is that? I mean, it seems a little silly, but is that like any little bit of a consolation prize, or like is it just like, is this all tongue in cheek? Like, is this just like a joke that an Inter Miami podcast would make?
Yes, but it's also one less fan base that Miami have to like. If Orlando made the playoffs when Miami didn't, that's like, oh, we'll make the playoffs next time. Well, hey, you've only made the playoff. If they do miss, you've only made the playoffs one time in your 7 or 8 year history, and we were in there with you. So, it's kind of like it helps out Miami. It gives them an extra chip in the race. So that's it'd be a good thing, and I'm smiling because I can't control it, but it would be a good
I
thing.
just think it's funny.
No,
I mean,
yeah,
I think
it would be funny.
I think the rivalries that have been happening with like Nashville and maybe to like a respectable standpoint with Atlanta, because there's a lot of like mutual respect amongst those fan bases. I think that those are like a little more organic. The Orlando one seems to be like a little less fun, I guess. I don't really know if you guys agree with
Violent. I mean, I wouldn't go as far to say violent, but it's close to violent. Like it gets to that point, right? Like at points, which is not a good thing, but it gets to a point where it's crossing a line.
Well, it sort of felt forced. It sort of felt like I was like told that I needed to hate you, and so now I'm forced to hate you, and so I'm going to do this irrational thing to hate you. I don't think that violent is the right word, but I think that like emotional is maybe a little more the proper word. Alex, do you agree?
Yeah, it's a lot. Orlando fans have been going back and forth with Inter Miami fans since Inter Miami got announced. I vividly remember it was Orlando's inaugural game at was it Camping World Stadium back in, was it 2015? And I think Kaká scored like a last minute equalizer, or was it a winner? And the Orlando City admin tweeted, "You can hear the screams all the way from Miami." And I believe that tweet is still up, which was, it was like hilariously early shade towards Inter Miami's bid, because I believe they announced it the year before. So it like this rivalry, it's kind of forced, but at the same time, it's been there for years, even beforehand, even before Miami got to the league. And you compare with something like that to Nashville, which is Nashville supporters don't like Inter Miami because when Nashville came in the league, they didn't get a lot of media coverage, and Inter Miami did, so naturally that breeds resentment, and that's fine, But Nashville's always got Inter Miami's number, so it's a bit of a one-sided rivalry. They're kind of punching down a bit, but I digress. But Orlando, for sure, it does feel forced, but I do think that there's some real animosity there, not between the players necessarily, but definitely between the fans. I don't know if there's a rivalry between a team. Like, are there any rivalries where Inter Miami players dislike the other players on the team? I don't think I've seen that yet. Maybe it's coming, but I don't know if you guys. Yeah, I don't know. But as far as the fan bases go, I think it's definitely Orlando and Miami that do not like each other at all. And yeah, I have a list of like the incidents and things that have
I'm trying to
happened.
think like Red Bulls maybe. Red Bulls maybe.
Mm, player wise,
But
probably.
I don't really know. There's been so much player turnover that I don't really
Yeah.
think that there's been people that have been here long enough to have those sort of
I kind of
rivalries.
think to the not. I don't know if I mean this is. I think this is probably the closest it gets. But remember the Philadelphia game in 2020, the penalty that Higuain took, and then there was all of that
Oh wow.
happening, and
Yeah.
yeah. So I guess that, but that is
Montreal maybe too because they trained here during
yeah,
COVID.
yeah,
I don't
Yeah.
really
yeah.
know. Like,
I don't know. But
It'll happen eventually.
the one thing about Orlando is, yes, it's forced, but at the same time also inevitable, right? Like when you have two clubs from the same state, like it's just bound to happen.
Well, and the other thing too, let's not forget the elephant in the room is that there were a lot of soccer fans here in South Florida that did not have an MLS team, and so they rooted for the closest thing to them because that was the road trip that they could go to drive the 3-4 hours to see them. So there were Orlando fans that became Inter Miami fans. That's just a fact, right? Like they were soccer fans that didn't have a team. Now they do. And so, I mean, I don't think that that's a knock on Inter Miami fans, but I think that there are people that used to have friends that they were rooting together in the same stands, and now they're on opposite sides of this animosity that I think that you can't ignore. I want to, Austin, touch on U.S. men's national team with you. Two World Cup qualifiers coming up. Of course, the big one, El Tree coming to Cincinnati, TQL Stadium. An interesting choice to not pick Columbus, to pick Cincinnati instead. And the roster just came out. They'll also travel to Jamaica, which I think might actually wind up being the more important of the two games in the grand scheme of things. But I do believe that the U.S. men's national team can go top of are we calling this the octagonal now? It used to be the hex. Now there's 8. So the octagonal, I think they can go top of it with a win over El Tree coming up next week. And just your first initial thoughts on the 25-man roster just released.
Yeah, I'm looking at it. I started with the defense because I wanted to see what center backs were included. I think that the center back pairing is a huge question for the men's national team going forward. And I see a lot of young guys: Mark McKenzie, Chris Richards, Miles Robinson, and then also Walker Zimmerman in there, who's still trying to prove himself to be a men's national team player going forward. And I think that he has the quality to do it. But then there's also a lot of quality ahead of him as well. I think we'll probably see a lot of a Chris Richards, Miles Robinson pairing, which is something that we saw earlier on. Chris Richards coming off injury. He got to be in the last camp. Now he's in this camp, which is good. One name that sticks out to me, though, is Joe Scally from Borussia Mönchengladbach. His first call-up, he will likely get his debut with the men's national team. That's going to be awesome. Sam Vines is back. I know that he's been playing a lot in Belgium. So that's interesting, and I don't see Serginho Dest. I believe he's injured, so that's unfortunate. It'll be interesting to see if DeAndre Yedlin or Reggie Cannon is a starting right back against Mexico. Moving on to the midfield, you see the three that you kind of want to see: Yunus Musa, Weston McKennie, Tyler Adams, which is awesome. Kellen Acosta's there. Gianluca Busio is also there. Leggett is the inevitable one that's always there, and then you still have Berhalter's guy and Christian Roldan, which is just another one of those inevitable things that's going to happen. It's one of those like balance and verticality things that Berhalter speaks of. And then going forward, Pulisic's back. That's the big story there. Christian Pulisic's back. But I'm not really seeing, other than Ricardo Pepi, like a true number 9 other than Pepi. So it looks like, I think Pepi is going to be starting as a number 9 in these next 2 matches. And I think the U.S. men's national team is going to try and solidify Pepi in that role. I'm really excited for Brendan Aronson. He's been outstanding for Salzburg this season, even in the Champions League. So that's really good to see. But I'm excited that Christian Pulisic is back. And then also you have the goalkeeping battle between Steffen and Turner, which I think Turner has the edge in right now, but that's something to look at.
What, do you read into anything with Cincinnati? I found that to be the fact that they chose that as a venue. I know that you just did the roster breakdown. I think that Turner is the number 1 right now too, and I think that Ricardo Pepi, with the season that he's had, with the year, the 2021 that Ricardo Pepi has had, no one is having a year like Ricardo Pepi. So I think that definitely you can go there. Like you said, nice to see Pulisic back, but to pick Cincinnati, especially given Crew and everything that happened with them since the last cycle, and now also having a new stadium and being rivals of Cincinnati. Am I sort of like reading weird tea leaves here? Because that decision seemed odd to me, and I'm interested to see how. I guess I would be curious to see how Columbus people feel about it. But it feels like you do World Cup qualifying USA Mexico in Columbus. And to pick their biggest rival is just odd.
I
Maybe I'm stirring up trouble that I
I
don't
think
even
that you're
realize that I'm
stirring up
doing.
trouble that's like somewhat valid, but at the same time, was it a chance to play in TQL Stadium? Is this the first time the men's national team will be in TQL Stadium? So that's
Yes.
one thing. Columbus had a game in the
But I
last
think
cycle, if
also it
I'm
would have
not
been the first
mistaken.
time in the new Crew Stadium because they always played at Lamar Hunt.
But didn't they? I thought they played in the last cycle. Didn't they play?
Oh, yes. Yeah.
I
Yes.
forget which team it was, but yeah,
Costa
they. I
Rica, I
think
think
they.
it was. Yeah.
Yeah. Costa Rica. It was. It was. So I don't know. It's you want that Mexico game to be there. The history that's there is more than anything you can possibly look over. But I think a little bit. But I'm also not from that area, so maybe I don't know what Columbus fans are feeling. If they are feeling some
It's
type of
sort of
way, I'm
like
not going to discredit them for it.
but what I mean is like it's sort of like the we were just talking about the Miami Orlando rivalry, right? And those two venues, right? Joe Robbie is going up against Camping World for Hard Rock. Sorry, I always do
Joe
that. Is
Robbie.
is
Wow.
going up
Pro
against
players,
Camping World.
Sun Life,
Yeah,
Landshark
Landshark.
but
Stadium.
one of those two is going to host for the World Cup, right? So like whichever one gets that for in the future is I mean that's almost like a venue rivalry in and of itself. I don't
It'll
know.
it'll be
What
Hard
do you
Rock,
think,
by the way.
Alex?
It'll definitely be Hard Rock. It should be
I think
anyway.
so
It
too.
should be.
Yeah.
I think honestly, I think FIFA will do both. I don't know, but if there's anyone, this is me being biased. If there's anyone that is equipped to hold soccer events, it's Hard Rock Stadium. They renovated it. Not specifically, but it's tailored to that. Like they're building an F1 track near it. There's a tennis tournament, the Miami Open, that is a brilliant tournament that they host every year up there, and every January. So if there's any stadium that's equipped to hold a World Cup event, it's Hard Rock Stadium. Nothing against any of those Orlando stadiums, but I think Miami's just a bigger pool. It's international.
Well, but
You can find.
they did just renovate Camping World too.
They did. Well,
Yeah.
still Orlando. Besides the amusement parks, it's not the best area. I used to have family. I used to have family members that live.
We don't want to get into that too much. We've talked about
Objectively, like there, outside the tourism spots, there's nothing to do there. And I think if you ask any Orlando native,
there's a lot of
they'll
mini
agree.
golf.
But I had a family member who lived up there, and it's just boring. It's just fast food joints, and
You're gonna get all the Orlando people in your
it's
mentions.
it's fine. I'll just mute them like I did with the Santos fans. But yeah, I think it'll probably be both. But if I had to choose, it'll probably be Hard Rock.
Before we go, I do want to give out the shout out to Miami FC, who will be playing in a playoff game. They did make the playoffs as the fourth seed. They will be traveling to Louisville City, which I think is going to be a very interesting and exciting matchup. That'll be 8 p.m. on Saturday, ESPN Plus. I don't know how much you guys have watched Miami SC this year when you've gotten to see them. They are an exciting squad. At times can be a little bit of a roller coaster. So not dissimilar necessarily to Inter Miami. I think that they probably should have closed out the season getting up to one of those 2 or 3 seeds, but didn't wind up happening. They snuck in as the 4 seed comfortably as the 4 seed. They clinched with a couple of weeks to spare. I think actually like a month to spare in the regular season. But really, once they clinched, didn't like I said, it's kind of up and down with them. You never really know what you're going to get. Really excited to see them play against Louisville City. This is the one that I wanted to see very much so. Also, yes, Alex points out FIU, 19th ranked in the nation, will play number 1 Marshall in Miami this weekend. Number 1 defending, reigning national champions Marshall in Miami. That game is on Saturday. Check out FIU's soccer website for that because I think it's a 6 p.m. kick if I remember right.
Yeah, I have to double
But
check.
yeah,
Maybe I'll
they're
go.
normally 6 p.m. kicks.
Yeah, it's like 20 minutes from
They
my
fell
house.
to they fell last week to number 5 Clemson, but then bounced back against FAU with a 4-0 win, which I actually went to. Really looked like a quality team. This game against Marshall for them will actually decide the regular season champions for the Conference USA. Both teams, Marshall, number 1 Marshall, and number 19 FIU. FIU is actually ahead of them right now. So all they need is a draw, and they will be the number 1 seed in the upcoming Conference USA tournament. FAU, I think, is locked in as the 6th seed as well, just to give my Palm Beach County shout out. So a potential there for FIU locked into a first round bye. They'll either be the 1 or the 2 seed, regardless of outcome. But that game in Miami this coming weekend should be very exciting. I think I've touched on everything that we possibly could. So for Alex Winley, for Austin Robillard, and for our producer Andres, I am Ian Hest, and thank you for listening to the Heron Outlet. We will see you back here at the end of the season, guys. This is the last podcast that we have a game to talk about. So coming up next week, we'll be talking getting started on the off season. This is the Heron Outlet. Make sure you like, share, subscribe on Instagram, on Twitter, on YouTube, on Spotify, on Apple, on wherever you get your podcasts. We're all over the place, and we will see you back here this time next week.